Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined by John Todd and Nate Cooper, also of Sports Info Solutions, for another special draft preview edition of the podcast. Up first today, we have John Todd joining us. John, what is happening?
How's it going, Matt? Thanks for having me.
And as a reminder, we've had John Todd on before, but John and Nate were both the main scouting gurus that led our process on the Football Rookie Handbook. All of the scouting reports that you see in there, those guys were running point as my scouting directors on all of these different reports. So, John, you are an offensive lineman at heart. You're skinny these days, but back in the day, I bet you weighed a little bit more, and you still got that length that we love to see in our tackle prospects. But we came on, we wanted to talk some offensive line. This is not the strongest offensive line year. Is that right?
No, it's not. This offensive line class doesn't have elite bookend talent. Your top guys every year, your bona fide top 5 picks or anything that most classes usually do. But it's pretty solid throughout, especially in the interior. We love this interior class. And there's a number of players that have a lot of position flexibility and some solid starting grades from us.
So what do you mean when you say position flexibility? Let's get the folks at home involved in what we look for in our process, because a lot of our grading system is based just on that.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of guys that you have your guys that are strictly right tackles, you guys that are strictly centers that haven't played anything else. We've got a lot of guys in this class that your Elton Jenkins guys from Mississippi State who've played center, guard, and tackle. You've got guys that have played right tackle, then left tackle, like Jonah Williams, who we're going to talk about. You've got a lot of guys that have some experience in multiple spots, have the body type that fit multiple spots, the athleticism that can fit in any area that team's going to want to fit in. Some teams employ the philosophy of having the best 5 guys on the field at all times, whether they're comfortable with that spot or not. So that's going to be a thing that a lot of teams like this year.
Interesting stuff there. All right, well, let's get right into it right off the bat. Talk about who do you think is the top offensive lineman in the draft? We see like kind of different things in the mock drafts, things out there, but who's the top prospect for you overall?
So one of the reasons why maybe a lot of people don't think this is the best offensive line class overall is because our top player is a center, which aren't usually is the highly thought of position, the super valuable position on offensive line. But Garrett Bradbury at NC State is our top offensive lineman in this class. He's an excellent athlete. Zone-based teams are going to love his flexibility and his range. His ability to move laterally off the snap and flip his hips to reach and seal 2 and even 3 techs from center is really impressive. He's got the reactive athleticism to mirror well in pass pro, and he processes blitzes and stunts really quickly inside. He's the leader of that offensive line. He could add some strength and play with a more consistent base, but we really project him as a day one starter inside with some possible Pro Bowl potential.
Yeah, and I think when you looked at the analytic breakdown on Garrett Bradbury, it fits with what you're saying right there. This is a player who's better in the passing game than in the running game, and he's much more of a zone blocking fit than a gap blocking kind of like overpower you type of guy. That matches what you're seeing on the film.
Absolutely.
So just looking at some of the numbers there, he started every game, 13 games a year for each of the last 3 years. You only see 15 total pass blown blocks over that entire time compared to 28 total run blown blocks, which isn't a terrible number in its own right. So good numbers there. Not a lot of penalties for this player over the course of his career, just 5 holds and 2 false starts over that time. And then you see a guy, just like the film matches, who's been more successful, a lot more zone run blocking. So 83% of his runs, of the runs for NC State with him in the game, have been zone runs throughout his career. You don't see a ton of running success from this team overall, and that matches his blown block stat line. Just a 0.8% pass blown block rate with a 2.7% run blown block rate. So this is a guy that's really going to help your passing team more than he's going to be a big grader in the run game. Is that right?
Definitely. He's got the athleticism to fit anywhere. He played some guard his sophomore year too, and he's a guy that he's really nailed the process this offseason. He showed out at the Senior Bowl, might have been the best offensive lineman there, and he really dominated the combine athletically. So all that adds up to our best offensive lineman in the class.
Okay, pretty good. Well, let's swing back and let's go to a little more classically valuable position and talk about the tackles a little bit, because there are different players that we see on the different mock drafts and up high in the draft. I think we've got a guy on the top of our list who I haven't seen on the top of too many people's list, and he's a guy that you have a lot of familiarity with. What can you tell me about Greg Little?
Yeah, Greg Little might be surprising to some, but he's our top offensive tackle. We've got a lot of guys in the mix for that spot, but he comes from an air raid influenced offense, so he's got plenty of pass pro experience. We saw a really high ceiling with him because of his length and his lower body technique. He's a natural bender at the knees, which helps him anchor against power and really rolls his hips into contact. He's got heavy feet to anchor and drive in the run game, and he just has the look of your prototypical left tackle that some of the other guys in this class might not. He needs to improve his hand placement, and he's far from the most athletic lineman in this class. He did not have a great showing at the combine, but we really liked his film first and foremost, which is what this book was all about. And he has all the tools to grow into a really strong left tackle.
Yeah, so interesting player, because I think when you look at him, you see a lot of really different traits from what you saw when you look at the Bradbury analytical breakdown in the Football Rookie Handbook. Again, another player who's been mostly a starter for the better part of 3 seasons here. 40 total blown blocks in his time, but him 25 of those happening on pass plays and 15 on rush plays. So a little bit of a different breakdown there. A player who's been better in the run game than the pass game. Now, really interesting stat on this guy. No holding penalties over the last 3 years. Pretty ridiculous stat right there. And he's been a guy who's been more successful in the gap scheme stuff than in the run scheme stuff. They've done more gap stuff. They average more yards per attempt on the gap stuff. So, the blown block percentage overall, just 1.3 in the pass, 1.1 in the run. Very good numbers across the board right there. I think if he can grow into somebody that can have the athleticism to match his strength and kind of the balance and different things that we see in his game, he could be somebody that really does lift your run game as well as probably lock down that pass side.
Definitely. He looks really good coming downhill, and he plays in a high-volume offense with a lot of snaps, a lot of quick passing, just a lot of passing in general. So for the no-hold stat, the everything that's surrounded, it's an interesting breakdown of a unique type of player.
When you see him, do you see left or right?
I think he's a left. I think he could play right. He's got he started off at right, I believe, at Ole Miss and moved to left. He was a big-time recruit. Elite high school recruit, stepped in right away, replaced Laramie Tunsil, first-round pick. And actually, a fun note, he and Bobby Evans from Oklahoma blocked for Kyler Murray in high school back in the day.
Oh, wow. So even back in high school, Kyler Murray was having to throw over tall offensive linemen.
Yes.
Shocking that, he didn't play with midgets throughout his career up until this point.
Well protected throughout a lot of his career.
Well protected. All right. Well, one guy who also has been a strong protector for his team, Jonah Williams from Alabama, somebody who I think more classically we've seen at the top of a lot of mock draft boards. He was basically tied with Greg Little right at the top. Both these guys ranked at a 6.8 grade range, which in our scout scale is a strong starter grade. So that's, if you're in that 6.7 to 6.9 range, you're not at that 7.0, that Pro Bowl level difference making blue chip type player, but you're a very strong starter here. So this is a really good grade on the player. Both of these guys come in right in that same grade, but I think they get there a little bit differently. What can you tell us about Jonah Williams?
Definitely. Jonah's right there with Greg Little, top our tackle rankings. He's lacked some length, which a lot of people have talked about, but he's really technically sound in all phases. He's got plenty of power to move guys off the ball and fist to his assignments really well. He's very detail-oriented. He's got patient hands and a picture-perfect vertical set to me in pass pro, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to grade him as a tackle and not a guard. That's been the big question with him, whether he'd kick inside or stay at tackle. For me, barring the roster construction on the team that he gets selected by, if they've got established tackles and just want to get the best 5 out there, something as we mentioned, I always believe if a player has the talent to play outside, that's where he should get his first shot. That's where he provides the most value to a team. He's proven in the SEC at Alabama against some of the best speed rushers out there. And, some people thought Cleveland Farrell won that matchup in the national championship, but I thought Jonah won a lot more than he was given credit for. However, we do see the reason why a lot of teams prefer him at guard. And I think he'd be great there too.
A guy that you just reminded me of that I don't know. I don't watch Jonah Williams and think of this player really at all. But when you say a guy that you want to try him on the outside first, see if he can fit in at tackle depending on the roster construction, but kind of worst case scenario would be very good to kick inside and could be, a lockdown guard for you, kind of worst case scenario. Reminds me of Justin Pugh. A player that I watched coming out of Syracuse. Aside from that, I would never think Jonah Williams and think Justin Pugh, but just as you were discussing him, I remember thinking at the time, I wasn't the biggest fan of Pugh, but I know a lot of people around the league were, and he ended up being a first-round pick. But I think to the credit there, even if you didn't see a guy that could go on to be a tackle, you would see a guy that could be at least a solid starting guard level player. So just something that came to mind right there. When we look at the breakdown of Jonah Williams, one thing that's going to stand out for any Alabama player is just the number of games. 44 games started over the last 3 years, 36 total blown blocks over that time. So pretty good number right there. He had 3 holds. Not everybody has no holds throughout their career. Just 3 holds over the course of the last 3 seasons. 7 false starts to go along with it, though. He's been a player that really has been at a more balanced game when you look across the stat line and the analytical profile. Has done it in the zone blocking game, has done it in the gap blocking game. Blown block percent, just 1.4 in the pass, 1.8 in the run game. Very good numbers right there. And then you see, some of it's a reflection on that Alabama offense, but 2.3 yards before contact per rush attempt to his gap. Pretty good there. 10.2 EPA to his gap in 2018. Those are really strong numbers when you see 6 expected points added per attempt to your gap per 100 rush attempts. That's solid stuff right there. So Jonah Williams, more of a balanced profile when you look at the analytics across the board on him.
He's going to project to be a pretty versatile player. Some teams might move him to guard. Some teams might put him at right tackle. He started at right tackle from day one at Alabama. He replaced Cam Robinson a few years ago, then moved to the left side the past 2. So he's a pretty versatile guy. And one of the other comps, I don't think he's going to be nearly as good, but one of the interesting ones that people are talking about at the Combine, his idol's Joe Thomas, who's another tackle with shorter arms. They had a pretty cool moment at the Combine when Thomas introduced himself. So that would be – Jonah Williams would hope to become something close to the type of player that Joe Thomas is. But offensive tackle with shorter arms, a lot of people had some questions on Joe Thomas as well back in the day.
Yeah, I noticed Joe Thomas took a page right out of your book, losing a lot of weight after he finished his playing career. I, respect that move on his part, kind of trying to, just like we see, these offensive tackles coming up now, trying to be the next Joe Thomas. We see Joe Thomas trying to be the next John Todd. Flattering stuff there for sure.
Flattering stuff.
All right, let's move back inside. Let's talk about the guards in this draft. I don't know if we thought there were any high-end talent amongst the guards. Is that fair to say?
Sure. No elite guys, but we had a lot of guys, a lot of interior players that we think can possibly start early.
Yeah, I remember as we were going through these players and talking through a lot of them in the process of putting the book together, there might be 10 guys that can be starting level offensive linemen in this draft when you just kind of look around at the various. So even though we're not talking about a lot of high-end talent, definitely a lot of guys. And I know at the guard position, there was some kind of sleeper type prospects from small schools that you wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, we've got some Michael Dieter types. We didn't talk about Dalton Reisner, who we graded as a center, but he could play center, guard, and tackle too. There's some bigger name guys, but just to mention a couple sleepers in this draft at guard, keep an eye out for Nate Davis from Charlotte and BJ Autry from Jacksonville State. Nate Davis is an extremely flexible player for someone his size. Check out his stance on film. That's the most impressive thing about him. It's amazing how he fires out so well from such a low position. His butt's almost on the ground every snap. It's a really noticeable thing and interesting. He looks like a tight end. But he pulls really well, and he's a strong run blocker with really good footwork and power. He played right tackle his senior year, but he's a better fit inside where he's probably going to be less isolated. He can get some limited reps against speed on the edges. He lacks some length, but we really liked him. He was an interesting guy for me. I think he ended up as our number 2 guard, actually. He was in the mix to be our top guard with some bigger names, Michael Dieter, Chris Lindstrom, some guys like that.
Yeah, and then what can you tell us about Autry?
Autry might be a bit of a project. He's going to be drafted much later, we believe, than some of the other guys, but weight control is going to be the big factor for him in reaching his potential or flaming out totally. He came in at 351 pounds at the Senior Bowl. He might have been even heavier when he was playing. That being said, he's got some of the most fun film to watch of any player in this class. He tossed defenders around, pummeled guys at the next level nearly every play, and not always just because of his size or the level of play that he was at. He's got a good combination of size and the leg drive with surprising agility and flexibility on pulls. At the second level, he actually started his career at Baylor too, so he's got some ability. But he struggled a bit at the Senior Bowl, which was a big factor for him playing at a smaller school. He's going to be a late-round pick, might be a free agent, but he could really hit if he adjusts to the talent jump and puts in the work to keep that weight down.
Yeah, we got to see. I can't know if I can think of any players that have come and made the jump out of Jacksonville State. So
it'll be interesting.
Interesting to see there. All right, John Todd, thank you for coming on. Any last notes on the offensive line group before you head out?
No, it was fun. It was a good class. It was interesting where you're not really focused on, as we said, no top guys to really focus all your energy on that everybody knows. It was kind of we enjoyed kind of putting our own take on who we thought the top guys in this class were without too many hot takes or anything. We really enjoyed it. It's a fun class.
Yep. As Don Shula said, show me a good offensive line and I'll show you a good offense, even if there isn't high-end talent in the draft. I think we all definitely would recommend looking in, especially on that second day in the second and third round there. There's going to be a lot of starting level offensive linemen that come off the board that day. So keep an eye out for that. All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Nate Cooper. Hey, everybody. If you like hearing about all the different players in the NFL draft, if you are a draft expert yourself and you're looking to learn more, the SIS Football Rookie Handbook is a must-have for everybody at home. It's the same thing that the teams are using. You get your analytical breakdowns of all the different players in the draft here based on Sports Info Solutions, proprietary statistics, and then you get the real NFL-style scouting reports based on my time coming up with the Saints and with the Browns and learning how the scouting reports are really done on the NFL level and brought to you at home in the book. So if you're interested in what we have on the podcast, please support us. Check it out, the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. It's available at actasports.com, ACTA-sports.com, and it's available on Amazon. Check out the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, and thanks for supporting the podcast. All right, joining me now is Nate Cooper. Nate, the operations associate here at Sports Info Solutions, who's done awesome work on both the baseball side and the football side, a true two-sport stud. Nate, who helped run the process on this book, we wanted to talk about a few of the positions that we haven't been able to get into yet from the Football Rookie Handbook, including running back, tight end, and linebacker. So right off the bat, Nate, what can you tell us about this running back class as a whole?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me again. It's been a little while, so I'm glad to be back. The running back class as a whole is an interesting class. There's nothing that's too high end other than our top guy that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But there's a lot of guys here in the middle rounds that could definitely come in and maybe not start right away, but could be a guy that comes in within the first couple of years and definitely contributes in a couple of different factors.
All right, well, let's get right into it. We can all argue at other times. We can talk with Aaron about whether or not we want to draft a running back early. But one guy who I think is going to go in the first round is certainly our top running back. That is Alabama's Josh Jacobs. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Jacobs, I think he's the only guy that has a real first round consideration. He plays on another level. His tenacity in the run game and as a pass protector are clear, and they're very evident whenever you watch him on film. He has the lower body strength to run between the tackles with power, and it allows him to bounce off potential tacklers with excellent contact balance. With that power, he also shows good speed, quickness, and elusiveness to also make guys miss in the open field. He needs to improve his overall ability in the passing game, especially as a receiver and a check down guy. But he makes plays with the ball in his hands, and he can deliver a blow in pass pro as well. You could toss him out there at fullback, and he'd actually be a pretty solid fullback for you.
So that's interesting. You mentioned that he needs to improve in the passing game. Isn't that something right now when we're looking at running backs that should be the real difference-making attribute? I know when we talk about our critical factors for running backs, for example, in the book, we talk about instincts and vision, we talk about contact balance, and we talk about your impact to the passing game. How does Josh Jacobs rate out in the passing game, and what is it about his game that even if that's not his calling card, that still makes him kind of worthy of that first round potential in your eyes?
Yeah, I think he has the skills to be able to develop it. I think they didn't use him as much as a passing running back, just because if you look at Alabama, they have Damian Harris, they have other guys out there that can actually do a little bit of everything. So he cycled in a lot. Damian Harris is probably the more complete passing back on that team. So like I said, he has the skills. He has the hands, he has the power and elusiveness to be able to put it all together whenever he gets to the NFL level and they ask him to actually do more in the passing game.
All right, interesting stuff there. And it's not like he wasn't used at all, of course. 104 routes run in 2018, and he got 26 targets, 20 catches on those plays. So it's not like he wasn't used at all. 2.4 yards per route run, not bad for a running back. So I think that supports what you're saying there for running back. Just want to see it more. He was split out wide 10.5% of the time. One of these interesting stats you get from the Football Rookie Handbook. So that's something really interesting because historically we see most running backs very, very seldom split out wide. There'll be some guys that you'll see come along that split out wide a whole lot, a higher percentage of the time, more of that Le'Veon Bell type usage. And then you look at Josh Jacobs at that 10% range, 11% range. He's kind of right in that middle zone right there. So I think there's some room where that could grow in the future. But the early returns, at least on kind of not having the high volume, the efficiency numbers look to be pretty good. As a runner, one thing that's interesting that stands out when you look at his analytical breakdown is over his career, he's averaged more yards running inside than he has off tackle or outside. That's something that you usually don't see for running backs. And for whatever his yards per carry, 5.9 throughout his career, that's not like that's been crazy inflated, Alabama numbers. 3.9 of those have come after contact. So pretty impressive numbers right there. He's broken a lot of tackles each of the last 3 years, 41, 33, and 38, and less than 120 carries each of these years. So pretty good broken tackle rate there for him. And then you see the usage and how he's kind of had a diverse impact. 56% of zone blocking plays go for positive play, whereas on gap blocking schemes, he goes 66% positive play. So he's somebody that could definitely be used as a bulldozer in there in those power schemes. Is that pretty much the book on Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whenever he gets to the next level, he's really going to make a difference for whatever team drafts him.
Okay, he's a guy that gets a lot of love. A guy that might be better value when he actually comes off the board in this draft is our number 2 running back, Devin Singletary out of Florida Atlantic. What can you tell us about him?
Singletary is fun to watch. Like we were just talking about with the mileage, Josh Jacobs only has 250 carries in his career, so he's coming in without much mileage on his body. Singletary is the complete opposite. He's had over 700 carries in his last 3 years. That's probably one of the big question marks surrounding him, considering he's a little bit of a smaller back. But in terms of his ability, it's off the charts. His elusiveness is arguably the best in the class, and he has an uncanny ability to break tackles and force missed tackles. And it's either with his quickness and agility or his contact balance and low center of gravity. It's so fun to watch him run the ball and basically make guys miss. Among players with at least 100 carries this last season, he had the highest broken tackle rate in the FBS and is about 2.5 times more than the college average. So he's a guy that really forces a lot of missed and broken tackles. He actually reminds me of LaShawn McCoy coming out of Pittsburgh too, just the way that they run and just avoiding contact and doing what they can to make big plays. He needs also a little work in the passing game just because they didn't utilize him as much. He actually was out there for well below half of their passing plays. So he needs to become more of a natural catcher of the football as well. But his skills are there, and he should be a guy that really makes an impact early on in his career.
Yeah, looking at the analytical breakdown on him, the production is obvious. Over 4,000 yards rushing over the last 3 years, and 6 yards per carry over that time. So no questions there. But you see some really different things when you compare him to Josh Jacobs. We mentioned how Josh Jacobs had a higher yards per carry inside than outside. Well, Devin Singletary is not just typical in having a higher yards per carry outside than inside, but to a ridiculous extent. In 2018, he averaged 7 yards per carry to the outside, 5.6 off tackle, and 4.2 inside. So just a linear progression there of how much better he did outside compared to inside. You already mentioned how much of that he's done with broken tackles and forcing missed tackles. But one thing that I think that fits what he is as a runner is a zone blocking runner, not made to be a power guy, not made to be a gap guy. And I mean, when you look at his positive play percentage, 42% when they run zone, just 20% when they ran gap schemes with him. So part of that's low sample size because they just didn't try to do that a lot, which is intelligent for them. But a part of that tells you that he's going to be a much better fit. I think the Shady comparison that you brought up is a good one because he's going to fit in that outside zone type scheme offense much better than anything else. And then looking at, again, we're talking about running backs here. These guys have to bring value in the passing game. I do worry about him. Split out less than 1% of the time. As you mentioned, he's hardly on the field for passing plays, just 61 routes run total in 2018 and 0.6 of a yard per route run. So just no production there, really. 36 receiving yards the entire year this year. He's had some more in previous seasons. You saw 26 receptions in 2016, 19 in 2017. So I think a little bit of what we're seeing when we turn the film on is that we think this guy has the ability to, and it's just not how he was used this past year, but special ability in terms of being that outside zone ball carrier. And I think that's going to be the big make or break for with him is what kind of impact he can provide in the passing game.
Absolutely. I think he's a guy that you could get probably in the late second or third round. Obviously he's our number 2 guy, and we think he can go in that range and really make an impact early on.
All right, sleeper time. Who do you got? Who's the running back sleeper? This is what I'm interested in. I'm not drafting running backs early. I want my late guy. So tell me who you got here.
This is a very interesting one. We actually have DJ Knox from Purdue. He's only 5'6.5", but he's 210 pounds. He's thick lower half. Has the power to run between the tackles and has a little bit of the speed and elusiveness out on the edge. He can work in pass pro and be a threat out of the backfield as a receiver. Reminds me some as a poor man's Darren Sproles a little bit in his overall
I was going to say,
ability.
just talking about the height weight. I was with Sproles in New Orleans for a while, and I think we had him at like 5'6", 190. I always say I don't care about running back height. Running back height is not something that I'm really interested in. You can talk about length as far as pass protection, but if we have Darren Sproles playing in pass protection a lot, we're probably doing something wrong as in terms of how we're using him. So just interesting there when you look at that. Just please have that thickness around the midsection. Don't tell me about the running back height. And DJ Knox has that and then some.
Yeah, absolutely. He did 30 bench reps at his pro day. So this guy's short in stature, but he's a strong, thick dude for sure.
Interesting. And what is it that you like about his game? Where do you see him fitting in on the next level?
I think he's a late round guy, but just what he brings as a runner and as also, his feistiness in the pass protection has the ability in the passing game as well. Could be a little bit of a 2-down starter and also be that role player on 3rd down a little bit. So I think he can come in and actually be a guy that backs up and plays pretty well.
All right, interesting prospect to keep an eye on there. Let's move forward and let's talk about the tight end group a little bit. So we had John on earlier and we talked about the big nasties, but we need that tight end position. We need guys that can impact both the run game and the passing game. Gronk is gone. Who do we got coming in here?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about 2 guys that are actually from the same college here. So we're going to talk about our top 2 guys, both from Iowa, TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. So starting with Hawkinson, he's the all-around tight end that you're looking for at the next level. He can catch the ball. He can run routes well, but he can also stay in line and block with incredible efficiency. He's smart with a high football IQ, helps him in both aspects, in the run and the pass. He's a savvy route runner and knows how to run his routes and separate from defenders, and also possesses good footwork and hand usage to be effective blocker in the run game. But then whenever we go over to Fant, he's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. He's a different monster. He split out as a receiver 30% of the time for Iowa this past season, which is much more comfortable in the passing game. He's one of the guys that has the size and the speed to create a mismatch against linebackers and smaller corners. And he also shows some ability to block in the run game, but his skill set is much better on the outside. So in talking about both these guys, they both bring a little bit different things to the next level, but they should go early in the draft and really, in their own ways, improve and be someone that can definitely help the team for a year to come.
Yeah, I think anybody that's watched Iowa play can tell you pretty easily the difference between these 2 players, where they stand out. And, before any of the combine numbers with Fant running, I think 4.50, all that kind of stuff, we had him at number 2 ahead of that time, even though he didn't have great production throughout his college career, especially, compared to his teammate. But TJ Hawkinson, he is that I'm not saying that he's going to be Gronk, but that well-rounded skill set, that Y tight end, that inline tight end who's got the ability to do some different things. And for an example of how different Hawkinson and Fant are, Fant being much more that move tight end type person, you see Hawkinson split outside 15% of the time throughout his college career, straight out of the Football Rookie Handbook. That's not bad. That's a solid figure. That's balanced usage right there. Fant split outside 30% of his time, so he doubles that. Meanwhile, when you look at how they impact against man and zone, remember, these guys playing for the same team. Fant positive play percentage, 62% versus man, where Hawkinson's at 59%. But then you flip it on its head and you look at zone. Hawkinson 70% versus zone, whereas Fant just 52%. So that makes sense. Fant being more the man beater type, Hawkinson going to be more the quarterback's best friend, kind of sitting down in those situations there. Both these guys incredibly efficient in terms of their production last year. Receiver rating of 135 for Hawkinson, 129 for Fant. Tons of EPA generated, especially on the targeted plays. I love Hawkinson because I think he brings a lot of the production that Fant brings to the table with really ridiculous efficiency numbers in some of the places. 92% on target catch percent last year, 2.3 yards per route run. That's equal to Fant despite the difference in how these guys were used throughout the year. 74% completions when targeted. So I love Hawkinson right there. I think he's going to be a nice high draft pick for somebody that's going to be useful in the run game and the pass game. But Fant, as you bring up, that size, speed, that you just can't, that mismatch ability. And we talk about these tight ends. We've got to be talking about guys that create the mismatches. And sure enough, Fant is definitely one of those guys.
Absolutely. I think what we saw with Eric Ebron coming in a while back, I think Fant can even pass that. And, if they utilize him the way that his skills are shown on the field, I think he can really be a difference maker.
That's a really good point you bring up there. Where you land is going to make a big difference too. We can think of tons of examples, but you just brought up a good one right there. Whereas if you land with a team that's going to be able to use you and develop your skills and find a nice fit there, and you have a good relationship with the quarterback, it's going to paint a different picture of your career than if you land in a situation where it takes a little while to figure it out. And sometimes the team change will actually solve that too. So don't pass judgment too quickly as we all rush to grade the draft on April 30th. All right, from the tight end position, who do you have down the line that's a little bit more of the sleeper of the group?
So there's a guy, Caleb Wilson out of UCLA, is a guy that I really liked. He has an interesting background and has bounced around a lot with his dad being a coach. But if you look at on the field, he needs to become a little bit better in the run blocking game. But he's another one of those H tight ends that, he goes out there, he shows very good hands, receiving ability. And I think he's going to make an impact in the passing game right away. If he can improve his blocking a little bit, he can become a little bit more well-rounded. But he's a guy that he's going to go out there and definitely be a guy that, like we just talked about with Fant, that if you could split him out a little bit and let him do his work in the passing game, he's really going to contribute some.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to like when you look at the analytical breakdown on him. He's split out 24% of the time. He's very productive. Each of the last few years, lots of expected points added, 21.6 in 2017, 31.5 in 2018. Average target depth over 10 yards down the field this past year, and 25% target share. Target share, always something to really keep an eye on when you're talking about receivers and projecting them from college to the pros, because how much a team throws is really going to dictate how many yards they have. Their target share really tells you something about how much their quarterback and how much their offensive coordinator want to be calling their number out there in order to make the offense go. So those things get you excited, and there are reasons to think he could be productive. The thing that I worry about with him is the drops. We had him with 8 drops in 2018 to just 4 touchdowns, for example, 60 receptions total. So the drops, definitely something to keep an eye on. And, of course, this isn't going to be a guy that's going to really be an impact in the run game. Just doesn't have it, kind of the sand in his pants to be that kind of a fit for you. But in terms of being that kind of big slot type receiver, if he can catch the ball, there could be a real impact here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he started his career at USC, went over to UCLA. Obviously, with the quarterback change this year, that could have had a little bit of an impact. But, if he can hold on to the ball and really do what his skills suggest he can be a definite contributor in the game.
And we can keep an eye on, too. The medical flag on him from our injury expert, John Veros, is definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, let's flip around. We talked about all the different offensive positions over the course of the last few weeks. We talked about the up front, the studs of this class on the defensive line. We talked about some of the back-end prospects. We got to talk about those off-ball linebackers now, though. And I think, everybody's got the 2 Devins at the top. And we talked a little bit about Devin Bush, but let's get into Devin White, our number 1 linebacker in the draft. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, there aren't that many off-ball linebackers that are the top end of the draft this year, but Devin White's definitely at the top for us. If you want a rangy Mike, which I'm assuming most teams probably do at the next level, Devin White's your guy. He plays sideline to sideline with quickness, strength, and instincts. He has a high football IQ, is able to read and react quickly to what's happening in the backfield. He also notices false pulls really quickly and easily and doesn't get fooled by what the offense is trying to do. Navigates the trash effectively and is able to shed blockers to the ball carrier. Also, he's pretty productive tackler, but he does tend to miss quite a few tackles. That's kind of the one knock that I had on him. He seems like he wants to lay the wood and deliver a blow every time that he wants to get to the ball carrier, but that'll force him to overrun or whiff on some tackles every once in a while. In terms of coverage, he's effective most in zone coverage. He's not incredibly disruptive or anything, but he can make plays on the football, force the quarterback to look the other way a little bit. Needs to improve his fluidness and change of direction, ability to be a better defender in man coverage. But all in all, he's a 3-down linebacker with Pro Bowl potential that should step in day one for whatever defense that drafts him and be the leader on the team, especially for the defense.
Yeah, my old boss, Mike Lombardi, used to always say to me, if you want to increase the speed on your defense, then you got to increase your speed at the middle linebacker position. Your middle linebacker speed a lot of times becomes the speed of your defense because it really just changes. It changes the whole complexion of things. When you've got somebody that can run at that position, that's what you'd be getting out of Devin White. I think for sure there. Also, as a pass rusher, when they sent him, he got pressures like crazy, over 30 pressures each of the last 2 years, a pressure percentage of 25%. So out of every 4 times he rushed, he got a pressure at least a quarter of the time. That's a pretty crazy stat there for him. One guy, just while we're talking about Devin White, who I think we all think is the class of this draft and somebody that can really run your linebacker room for years to come. But we should talk about Devin Bush and just throw a little note on him here too. We see a lot of those very same traits, a lot of those very same types of abilities. Going to have to be somebody that's a little bit more protected in terms of being a real chase player. I think Devin White is ideally a chase player. Devin Bush has to be a chase player in terms of just the size and the lack of height that he has. But both these guys are shot out of a cannon. They're going to increase the speed of your defense, and they're going to make an impact on all 3 levels, run game, pass defense, and pass rush.
Absolutely, especially with now how much passing there is in the game today. You need to have speed and instincts at the middle linebacker position, and these guys have it.
Yeah, usually you see guys like this in the past. They would have been playing running back. If these guys had come up in the 80s and the 90s, these guys are running backs in the NFL, that devalued position. Somebody had some smart coaches a few years ago who said, get on the other side of the ball. You guys can cover and you guys can run at this linebacker thing. And that's where the money's going to be. And sure enough, where we've seen all the freaks, running backs splitting out wide and tight ends creating all the mismatches, guys like this that can play the linebacker position and really run. We saw the Chargers try to play 7 DBs on the field all at once. So guys like this are going to be really valuable when you can have that 4.4 speed, but actually have the 240, 250-pound frame to go with it. It's definitely exciting players there. All right, and let's get in. There's one more guy that you wanted to bring up, a little bit more of a sleeper pick from the linebacker position as well. What do you got there?
Yeah, there's a guy that I really like, Buffalo's Khalil Hodge. Watching him on tape, he's definitely productive as a tackler, had over 400 tackles in his career. I'd like to see him get a little bit quicker and shed more consistently, but he shows the instincts and the communication skills needed to be a solid Mike at the next level. He's a guy that I think you could get in the middle to late rounds. That his production was there, but needs to get a little bit thicker, get a little bit more nastier, and a little bit quicker, especially in the passing game. But he's a guy that can really develop for your team.
Yeah, the average tackle depth, just 3.7 yards downfield, strong number there for him in 2018. And then you see he blitzed 12% of the time, the pressure percent right at 12%, solid numbers there, 3.1% sack percent, again, solid numbers there. And then you see good production in both the man and zone coverage game, just a 37 and 35% positive play percent when targeted there. So good, solid stuff there, even if not the high upside physical ability, not the speed that we see from those the Devins that we talk about at the top of this draft.
Absolutely. Like I said, there's, just those couple of guys at the top end of the draft. And then behind that, there's nothing that, really suggests that guys are going to be able to come in and contribute right away. But there's a lot of solid depth players in this class for sure.
All right. Well, you guys did so much work on the Football Rookie Handbook, just organizing the entire scouting process that went into the whole thing. I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to work with you guys. Anything before we get out of here that you want to say before we sign off?
Not too much. I just appreciate you bringing me back on, and definitely look forward to the draft here in a couple of weeks.
All right. On that note, we will get out of here. We want to remind you, please, if you like the podcast, please support us, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. And, of course, you can get the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. It is available on actasports.com, and it's available on Amazon. If you want to get it in a real hurry, you can just download it on your Kindle right now. You can get it. It's even cheaper if you get it on the Kindle than if you order the book. But order the book, support us. It's a nice 600-page draft guide that you'll love to have with you as you watch the draft and see the picks come off the board. You flip open the page, you find the draft report, you find the analytical profile, just like we're talking about right here. It's like having John Todd and Nate Cooper on the couch with you as you get through that draft process. We'll be back with Aaron next week. Shout out to our fine producer, Justin Stein, and we will talk to you later.